What is going on YouTube? Gabmus here and welcome to the 37th episode of the Tech Pills live stream. So starting off with the first news of today, Fedora 34 will replace PulseAudio with PipeWire. So Fedora has always been a distro to pioneer new technologies like PulseAudio, funnily enough back in the day, Systemd, Wayland, and now PipeWire. This new multimedia framework has been under development for a while now, and it is already in use for some things other than audio like screen capture on GNOME Wayland. People have always found ways to hate on PulseAudio, and to some degree that's understandable considering some of its shortcomings, so hopefully PipeWire will be the new de facto standard sound system for Linux and will, again, hopefully solve all these problems. Some of the biggest problems that make people dislike PulseAudio include difficult configuration and difficult control via the command line PA-CTL utility, a lack of high-level documentation, and high latency due to the fact that PulseAudio is a daemon that runs on top of ALSA. In theory, PipeWire has the potential to solve all of these issues, except maybe for the latency. As to my understanding, PipeWire still relies on ALSA to some degree, and hopefully that's the case. I'll try to use PipeWire as the audio subsystem in my Arch Linux system and maybe report back if it works and if there's anything worth mentioning. Anyway, this is a very interesting change. I've been waiting for PipeWire to go more mainstream for a while now, mostly because I'm interested in those features that the Jack audio subsystem has, but I'm lazy enough not to want to configure Jack for myself. So PipeWire should bring some of the advantages of Jack in a more convenient package. So let's see where that goes. I'm grateful that Fedora, as always, is the pioneer for new technologies here and new shiny new stuff in the Linux ecosystem. That's something that no other distribution does usually, particularly if you consider things like Debian. Debian is more like a stationary target, if you know what I mean. It doesn't like change, or well, it takes it pretty softly, is another way to say it. And even distributions like Arch, it's not like they're not innovating. In fact, Arch, in my opinion, is one of the most innovative distributions out there, and no wonder it's the one that I use. So there's that, but it doesn't really bring new technologies or pioneer new stuff like Fedora does. For instance, yeah, in Arch you can kind of use PipeWire as your default audio subsystem, but Arch by itself doesn't have a pre-configured default that has been chosen for you. In fact, the whole point of Arch is that you build your system from the bottom up as you want it. So it's really up to the user in a system like Arch to choose whether or not they want to stay on the bleeding edge of technology or to stay more conservative and keep using something like PulseAudio. So I don't know. Hopefully we will see more improvements in PulseAudio in PipeWire and see it in the mainstream sometime soon. So let's quickly jump to the chat. And Dominic Hayes says, oh boy, in before, Firefox takes a while to adapt to PipeWire. Given their liking for PulseAudio a little while ago, I also wonder how fast Chromium-based browsers are going to adapt to PipeWire if they haven't already. So interesting point. According to the Arch Wiki, there is a patch for Firefox 68, I believe, or anyway, some version of a patch for some version of Firefox that allows you to use PipeWire. I haven't tried that myself yet because apparently the information in the Arch Wiki is a little bit outdated or not 100% correct, as I've tried this today. I wanted to use PipeWire as my audio subsystem mainly to see how that worked, and to be able to better talk about it like right now, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, and I didn't have the time to play around with it too much because I was supposed to start to enable a systemd socket, but that wasn't found. I couldn't find that even after installing PipeWire Pulse, which is the package that makes PipeWire into your audio subsystem with like a PulseAudio compatible API, and that isn't there. So I'm thinking that the Arch Wiki is a little bit outdated. So as of right now, I don't know how well the Firefox patch works or supporting Chromium. I know that Chromium has a flag in the Chrome column//flags advanced configuration thing, and you can enable PipeWire support for Chromium, but again, I'm not sure how that works. Dominic again says, interesting still. I do wonder how slow Mozilla is going to be doing it upstream, given how, if I recall correctly, they a little while ago made Firefox PulseAudio only upstream, didn't they? Unless I'm remembering their PulseAudio change wrong. Honestly, I'm not too well informed about all of this stuff about audio subsystems, and in particular PulseAudio. I use the audio on my Linux systems as it is. I didn't mess around with it too much. I know that it's prone to breaking, so I try not to play around with it too much. But besides, I've never found a proper reason to play around with it, nor it's particularly interesting to me. Things change with PipeWire. Since it's a new technology, it makes me curious. So I want to try that, but I don't really care too much about PulseAudio. So I'm not sure. We will talk about Mozilla later in today's episode, so stay tuned for that. There are some reasons possibly for why Mozilla has taken some positions on things like PulseAudio or other stuff. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. Blender 2.91 has been released with one option that will change your life. This new release of Blender comes with lots of improvements and new features, the usual stuff. Some of the more interesting ones, if you are one that works with 3D software: collision support for the sculpt cloth brush and filter, new sculpting gestures, support for custom curve bevels, and an option to convert volume objects into mesh and vice versa. This is all very interesting, but it's not too exciting to me because I'm not a 3D artist and I don't really do too much 3D. Still, I do have uses for Blender, and I've been using it a little bit in the past, mostly to like edit some model files, some model files for 3D printing, and to do some simple animations. And one thing that I've always found obnoxious about Blender is that the seemingly endless amount of options inside of Blender makes things so much difficult. And it's not just the amount of buttons and menus that you can open, but it's spread across a user interface that has more pages and tabs and sections than an encyclopedia. I don't know what's up with that. I know that Blender is like professional software and it's not supposed to be easy. Instead, it's supposed to be efficient for people that know how to use it. Still, barrier to entry is pretty high for Blender. Doing simple things in Blender, and particularly following old tutorials that use previous versions of Blender with different shortcuts, buttons, and user interfaces, always turns into a treasure hunt to find the right thing to click. And I honestly don't like that too much. But with version 2.91, this will hopefully no longer be a problem, or at least not as big a deal as it used to be. This new version introduces a new feature called Property Search that allows you to just press Ctrl F in the Properties panel on the right, or F3 everywhere else, and search for the button, function, or menu item that you need. If you know what it's called, you will find it. This is so dumb, yet it's so useful. It really blows my mind how hard a program can be just because of how the buttons and the menus are laid out. Again, I understand why Blender is the way it is, and I don't expect it to change. And honestly, if it did change, it would make life harder for people that already know their way around it. Instead, this change really makes a difference. You can just search for it like it used to be in the old Unity HUD. If you remember, back in the Unity days, you were able to just press the Alt button and then a search bar would come out and you could search through menus for, I don't know, particular functions or options that your application had. Of course, the application needed to support that. But having this built into Blender is really a game changer in my opinion. This is a huge deal, particularly for people like me that are not too familiar with Blender, but still need to use it from time to time, or want to use it, or want to learn how to use it. With this new feature, I know for a fact that I will start using Blender even more, and maybe at some point I will actually be good at it. Who knows? Dominic again says, insert, can it blend? Of course. Yeah, the old joke. I don't even know if people remember that old joke. Or, well, it was a series of YouTube videos, was it? I don't remember too well myself, but anyway. Also, Dominic again, Blender got Unity's HUD, except not really. Coolio. Unity DE, not the engine. Yeah, it's kind of like Unity. It lets you search in menus, but not just menus. Even the property panel on the right, it's usually filled with stuff and has multiple tabs. That can be a mess of itself. So being able to search on that too I think it's more than what the Unity HUD used to do. So again, very appreciated changes. Something that will make my life personally a lot easier when I need to use Blender. And if you want to learn it, it's now gonna be easier. The barrier to entry just got lower. That's the entire point of this thing. Ironically, we both thought about Unity's HUD. Yeah, I mean, it's the first thing I think about. I'm pretty sure that Unity was the first desktop environment to introduce something like that. Probably not. Possibly Apple had that in their toolkit, Cocoa or whatever. I remember something about that. But anyway, I think that the Unity implementation was actually better. If what I'm remembering about the old Apple HUD thing is correct, the Unity implementation was actually a lot better. Anyway, let's move on to the next news of today. Mozilla abandons the server web engine. And this is sad news. I told you we were going to talk about Mozilla here, so here goes. So Mozilla isn't doing great. After the recent massive layoff of 250 employees due to financial issues, Mozilla has now stopped development for the server web engine, the next-gen web engine written in Rust that would have replaced the old Gecko in future Firefox versions. Fortunately, its development will apparently not stop and will instead continue under the wing of the Linux Foundation. So hopefully at some point server will see the light of day, will be complete, done, usable at some point. Let's see where that goes. About the Mozilla thing, I mean, this is just the latest news that doesn't really come as a surprise. As again, Mozilla is struggling to stay afloat and has already abandoned a number of their other spin-off projects they were working on. Honestly, my hope here is that Mozilla can find a way to keep financing the development of Firefox, as it's currently the last standing independent browser that's not based on Chromium. And that's really, really important in today's day and age. Because if you think about it, most web browsers out there, be them desktop or mobile browsers, are all based on Chrome and Chromium. That's not good for the web in general, because it means that we do not have a standard that others have to adhere to. We have a standard that basically means nothing, and then we have the Chromium implementation, and that's what actually matters. And if a browser follows the standard and possibly along the way goes against like the specific wrong things that Chromium is doing, then your browser is just broken and no one will ever notice, because it's your browser that's broken. 80% of people use Chromium or Chromium-based browsers, and it works fine on those. So you're in the wrong for using Firefox or some other browser, because it's true that we mostly have Chromium and Firefox as browsers nowadays, but they're not the only two ones that are out there. There are also other browsers like the old Conqueror, that was the original browser that introduced KHTML, onto which WebKit was based. We have WebKit browsers like Safari and Epiphany, also known as GNOME Web, although that's an entirely different story. They're not, in my opinion, really suited to be full replacements for Chromium or Firefox. And well, I mean, WebKit is not in a great shape. Particularly, I'm telling you this particularly because I do have some projects that use GTK WebKit, and that has quite a lot of problems that need workarounds. It's not in a good shape. And really, the only other alternative to Chromium right now is Firefox. And for the standardization of the web and web technologies, this isn't a good thing. We need competition. We need different browsers, and we need the power to shape how the web works, to not be in the hands of one organization. In this case, Google. In the past, it was Microsoft, way back when Internet Explorer used to have like the whole market, the complete market domination. That used to be a problem. Then Firefox got popular, and then Chrome started, and of course from there Firefox has been slowly declining up to the point that we're currently at. And I don't really know what the future holds for Firefox and for the web in general. I sincerely hope that development will continue, and that we will see a rebirth in Firefox and in Firefox usage. Let's get back to the chat. Well, yikes, says Dominic. We don't talk about Firefox for Android's update as well regarding Mozilla. I mean, I don't think that Firefox on Android is doing so bad, honestly. I mean, it's the same browser. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same browser, and it shares the same problems and has the same strengths that the desktop version of Firefox has. So I don't really have too many thoughts about it. I know that some people don't like the new interface that the Firefox for Android browser has. I don't mind it personally. I think it's okay. It's pretty good. And I think that we have more problems we have to think about before starting to bash on the user interface. Dominic again says, I mean, not gonna lie, Mozilla didn't help themselves by butchering a lot of the Linux browser's GUI. No touch scrolling out of the box, the GTK integration is broken in many parts, especially in the client-side decorations, etc. While Chromium ended up having a lot of care put into its Linux variant, mainly because of Chromium OS. I think that this all boils down to the fact that they don't really have, at least in my opinion, a clear target anymore. They're struggling. They're trying to get some money back in some way to keep working on the browser. But I think that they're struggling even doing that. Apparently, at some point, they will introduce more like featured sponsored content in the new tab page. That could probably help. I'm not sure. And I don't particularly like having advertisement in my browser. So I don't really know what to say. I'm at a loss for words here. Firefox is probably the most important open source project right now, apart from the Linux kernel, and seeing it fail, it really breaks my heart and breaks my hopes for a free, as in freedom, web platform. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that evolves. And yeah, I know Linux is a small portion of the market, says Dominic, but still, maybe they could have seen some extra resurgence from bigger Linux community support if they were able to give more back to Linux. Again, I don't think that they willingly put Linux like on lower priority or something. I think that they keep working on Linux, and they probably have different teams for different parts of the browser, and it's not really into a terrible shape. The GTK integration is okay. Even like the Chromium GTK integration, I don't think that's great. I prefer how Firefox does things. And besides, in Firefox, you have some more customization if you want to have your browser better integrated into your GNOME system or into your GTK system. You can use something like the GNOME Firefox theme, GNOME UI Firefox theme, something like that. Anyway, it's a user Chrome theme for Firefox that lets Firefox basically look more like Epiphany. So I'm using that. I've been using it for quite a while now. It works decently. There are some bugs that I know of. Doesn't really break the user experience. And besides, Firefox this way looks a lot better. Still, the default Firefox, it's not like it doesn't fit in your desktop or whatever. I think that Chrome or Chromium, they stick out more in my opinion. But this is all, I think this is just personal preference and low priority stuff anyway. I don't really care too much if the border around the window is like straight instead of curved. These things don't really matter too much to me. I want to have a stable browser, something that I can rely on, something that's fast and that has all of the privacy features and extensibility that I need. And Firefox currently does give this to me. I don't know what will happen in the future. I am still holding on to using Firefox. I don't know if this will change anytime soon. I fear that it will. I hope it won't. So let's see where that goes. All right, let's move on to more cheerful news and to the next news of today. The road to GTK4 is paved with lots of work to do. So, the next version of the GTK toolkit, GTK4, is getting closer. As a GTK developer myself, of course, I want my apps to work on this new and shiny version, particularly considering that it should bring a number of non-indifferent performance improvements over the current GTK3. I have already started porting some of my apps to GTK4. The ones that are currently in a somewhat working order are WhatIP, Hydra Paper, and the Drara client for Reddit. Tackling this task on my own wasn't really a walk in the park, but it wasn't impossible either, particularly thanks to the help of the community around GNOME and GTK. In particular, I want to thank one person, the GNOME developer Alexander Mikhailenko. I hope I pronounce your name right, also known as Exalm in the community, for helping me and most importantly for bearing with me. I can be particularly obnoxious, and I need to commend his patience and goodwill. The porting effort for my apps is going decently, and I expect that once GTK4 will be officially out, we won't have to wait too much for other popular apps to be ported over to it. I have to say, in its current form, GTK4 is already pretty stable and usable, and most of the higher level stuff is still working very similarly to what it used to be in GTK3. One of the biggest problems I found during porting has been that the almost total incompatibility with UI files generated from Glade. Apparently, Glade will not be supported anymore in GTK4, and instead a new UI design tool will probably be created, and again, probably it will be made part of GNOME Builder, which does make sense. So if you're a developer using or interested in GTK, you can already start to take a look at GTK4. And for your own sanity, don't use Glade. I had to edit XML files, generated XML files by hand, and I really didn't want to do that. I had to. There are some scripts that make your life a little bit easier, but they're not perfect, and they don't know what to do with some of the tags that Glade used to put in UI files. So it has been like the most frustrating part of this porting effort. Let's get back to the chat. All I'll say is that I legitimately got more fed up with making FerrenOS new GTK trim work better in Firefox GTK implementation than Chromium's. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's because Chromium doesn't really follow your theme. It mostly follows the colors, and it just takes the colors from the GTK theme and does its own thing. So that's pretty much different. I'm pretty sure that Firefox, on the other hand, uses like plain GTK. Well, not plain. It has some a non-indifferent amount of custom stuff, but it still uses GTK. So it will, in a way, try to adapt more, like more than adapt, it will try to use the theme, and if the theme is broken for the things that Firefox does, then Firefox looks broken, to the point where I just gave up and made a change that forces Firefox to use Adwaita now. Yeah, this is really a problem with GTK theming in general, because that's not really working too well. It never has worked too well. There are things in GTK, and I know this, being a developer and getting closer to GTK, I know that there are some things that theme developers, they just cannot think about it. There's lots of custom stuff at some point that you will need to do as a developer, and that custom stuff, you can only test it against your theme or one or two themes. And like if you start introducing something like custom CSS and all that kind of thingamajigs, things really get very complicated for custom themes, and to the point that probably if you are a theme developer, you will need to make specific changes for specific applications to make the theme work across all the variety of GTK apps that are out there. So Dominic again says, hey, nice optimism. If you put GIMP and Inkscape into the picture, they use menu bars, and after all, for one, yeah, I mean, menu bars haven't really been deprecated. They just have a new shape now in GTK4. They use a popover instead of a menu, but I'm pretty sure that the API is still pretty similar. And by the way, if you're still using menu bars in new applications, you should really think about redesigning your app, or at least that's my opinion. Or maybe you just don't want to use the GNOME human interface guidelines, and that's fine too. But of course, you will have problems using GTK with a design that's not meant to be used with GTK, or a design that GTK doesn't really allow for. So let's move on to the chat. Yeah, just construct the GUI via code. It's painful to do in some GUI cases, but it's worth in the end. Chromium GTK3, I mean, Chromium uses title bar texture, all of the title bar buttons, styling, and the menus are practically full menu styling, minus shadows somewhat, maybe. Yeah, as you see, it really cherry picks what it needs to take from the GTK theme. It doesn't really use the GTK theme properly. So it's more like taking a hint for the styling than using the theme properly. About the thing with GUI, constructing GUI via code, I don't think that's a good idea, mostly because I'm pretty sure that Builder, as in GTK Builder, is a little bit faster. And anyway, if you try and mix your widgets, like creating the widget with the logic of the application, I know for sure that things start to get messy. And for better code organization, it's better if you just write your UI files in XML, and either we can use the new, well, when it will come out, we will be able to use the new UI design tool that's gonna be great as Glade, if not better. I'm hoping it will be better. So that's not gonna be much of an issue anymore, but at this current point in time, I'm pretty sure that if you want to create a UI, like standard UI for something, for a widget, for a piece of your application, it's better that you use XML where possible. I know that it's not entirely 100% possible everywhere to use XML, but if you can, I see no reason why you shouldn't. Well, there are reasons. Doing it via code it's usually easier. but it can get messier. So if you use XML, it will be less of a mess, if that makes sense. Dominic again says, for some context, said GTK4 theme is built off Adwaita. I mean, menu bars are also useful if your application has a lot of options in it. I mean, if you do it via code, you don't need to import files when launching the application, at the very least. But there again, I'm talking from a Python 3 context. Yeah, I'm using Python 3 as well. Live Leaky says, hello, Sicilian friend. Hi there. Nice to have some Sicilian friends watching. Anyway, what I was saying, there are things here, 3 things. 1, I do use Python 3. It's easy to do UI in Python 3, as well as it is in other programming languages that support GTK. Still, it's still better if you do it via XML, because you have a separation between the code and the UI. If you build the UI from an XML file, from a UI file, it's just like 2 lines. If you want to wrap it correct, it's okay. It's a 1-liner in Python to create a widget from a UI file, and then you have a completely separate file that describes the UI in XML. And that's, I mean, a separation of concerns, separation of context, if you follow me. So having the two things separate helps you, like, decreasing the amount of crap that you have in your code, and I mean, makes your the logic of your application, so the Python part, if you're using Python, or whatever the code part, whatever the language you're using, it makes it easier, makes it more legible, and more importantly, it's more concise. And if you're looking for something inside the logic of your application, you know that it will not be in the XML file. You know that if you're touching something, you're not touching anything that's related to the UI, so you can just leave the UI alone and just think about the logic if you have like this separation here. Okay, what else was there? About menu bars, if your application has lots of options in it, apart from cases like Blender or GIMP or Inkscape, well, even there, I think that in Inkscape, you could simplify the UI and the amount of menus a lot and still retain the same functionality. I'd have to sketch a mockup or something to make sure of that, but particularly for Inkscape, that's one program that I use a lot. I think that most of the menu options and things and the buttons that are exposed are somewhat redundant or could be contracted in a way. Another pretty decent UI design style that I really prefer to having menu bars is the ribbon interface. LibreOffice recently adopted it, and I think that it works for the amount of buttons and functions and things that you need. You have a tab interface for your toolbar, and you just need to go through tabs if you want to, instead of going through menus. And the nice thing about that is that if you have like a toolbar with tabs, you can start looking for icons instead of looking for text, and you can also develop some muscle memory that will help you be faster if you like to use or prefer to use the mouse instead of using like keyboard shortcuts. Anyway, the thing about menus, it really depends on what your application tries to do. I cannot really be too judging here, as my applications are typically by design very simple and try to do one thing or few things and not be too complicated. So again, it depends on what you're doing. Of course, Blender, GIMP, Inkscape, those are examples of applications that do kind of have a reason for having such a complex UI, so many menus, so many options, because there's so many things that you can do with graphics and with 3D modeling. Last message, Dominic says, if only these UI things weren't so complicated in Python 3 unless you want to import files. What's complicated about UI things in Python 3? It's not really too difficult. You have, okay, first of all, you have to have a decent structure for your Python GTK project. So you want to have your Mason build system in place, you want to have G resources in place, and you want to have all that stuff sorted. Once that is all sorted, then you can just include the UI files in my case, it's gonna be on the root of the project, it's gonna be data UI, and then all the UI files go in there, and you can do subfolders and whatever you really want. And then the corresponding G resource for that file is going to be /org/gabmus/ whatever the application name is /data/UI/the name of the file.ui. And that's how you access the UI file. You just load it with GTK builder new from resource, and then you put in these path I just told you. And you know that I've been doing this for a while because I remember all this by heart. And yeah, it's probably something that you have to get used to in a way. Again, it's not difficult. As with everything, you need to know what you're doing, and it's not like I'm all that expert on Python or GTK or whatever. I'm not really all that great. I was using, before starting the porting to GTK4, I discovered that I was using some functions or some constructors for some GTK widgets that were deprecated and were basically a compatibility layer with PyGTK. That's the old binding for GTK2. So I don't know. I guess you just have to get used to things and get to know how things work. I mean, it's simple if you import a file for the GUI to be made from, but if you do it fileless, then things get complicated if you're doing something serious, if you're doing some serious GUI design. It's simple if you import a file for the GUI to be made from. Well, you don't really use import for UI files. Okay, I don't really know what you're talking about here. Anyway, I think that our time's up for today. So if you want to keep going on with this discussion, I'm really interested. And hopefully, if you're doing something for Farron OS, if you need some help or whatever, feel free to join the TechPills community. Everyone, of course, feel free to join the TechPills community at techpills.technology/community. You can find the links in the description or use one of these very nice, convenient QR codes on the bottom of the screen right now. So this is gonna wrap it up for today's video. Press like if you like this video, subscribe if you want more of this, and thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.